All right, guys, what's going on? Needs more drums here. Back in Accelerando in our 7th episode of our 12-hour city. And today we're going to be focusing on part 2 of building the downtown. So filling in some of these gaps in the downtown. But the main focus today is going to be parks. And we want to fill in some gaps around the city just by adding some green space. And one thing that, is cool about this game is that with the introduction of all like the pocket parks and everything like that, you can actually take those weird little lots that you have in your city that you don't really know what to put there. It might be too small to kind of zone something. You want to keep some space between buildings. It helps to just throw like some pocket parks in there. You can move the surface around a little bit, kind of add to it, and then just fill in the rest, with some trees. And then there you go. You got a nice little park in your city that's actually functional, because those pocket parks and everything, they are functional, and they actually do attract people. They help your city's leisure score and attractiveness score. So it makes sense, when you have these empty lots, to even just put down one kind of park building and make that a functional area for your people to go to. So that's going to be the name of the game today. And then you're going to see, like, first and foremost, I know we didn't finish the downtown in the last episode like I had originally planned. There was quite a bit going on. I didn't really realize the scale of trying to build that, trying to get the university down, trying to get the hospital down, or not the university, it was a university and the college. We put a college down too. So it was good to just kind of get some of that laid out, and just so we kind of know where things are going to sit. And now today we can go back and add in some more buildings, kind of clean up some areas. It's not going to be completely finished. It's not going to be completely all built out, but I'm not mad about that. I'm still just kind of figuring out where key buildings are going to sit. And then, I constantly feel like I get new ideas every time I, open up the game and kind of look at this area again. So there's probably going to be some more changes that happen throughout the series, and maybe even after the fact. So, like I said, throughout this series, is that when we're done with the first, 12 hours of kind of the initial build, I do intend to come back and kind of, look at what we did, see if there's any areas where we can make improvements, see if we can, make any significant changes or additions. And the main thing that I want to do is actually go back and make some districts, kind of really establish like where the neighborhoods are. And I'm not doing that like as part of the first 12 hours, just because, it's just one of those things that I always like to do kind of after the fact. Everything's going to be in its right place. We can go back and see if there are any gaps in our city services, and everything like that. So it'll be cool. And then we can kind of give some names to buildings and everything, and certain districts and neighborhoods. We can come back and name everything. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun to do. But that's going to be a later issue because we still got quite a bit left to build. So we still have to do, the rest of the downtown. We have to do the port. We have some couple neighborhoods that we got to fill in. We still have to detail the university campus. I said the port. We still have to do that whole area by the port. Actually, it's going to be, another maybe some offices and kind of commercial area, like a tourist area, so to speak. So we're going to go back to that. I think that's the next episode. Actually, it's going to be focusing on the port, and then kind of maybe that, if we get that built, working on some of the surrounding coastline. But here, this was something kind of cool that I wanted to do. I wanted to add in this wide bike path / walking path, and sort of have this nice barrier between the main arterial avenue, the main arterial road there, the 6-lane road, and then sort of this other part of the downtown here. So this cool like elevated bike path will be a interesting way to do that. And maybe we could think that maybe one day in the past this is some sort of like elevated train line or something, that they took part of it and then repurposed it for as like a walking path. And that does happen a lot. You see it in some cities. I don't know any examples off the top of my head, but I just know that I've seen it where they take like old, elevated rail lines and stuff and convert them into park space. So that's kind of what we can do here. Jury's still out as whether or not I actually decide to add in bikes in this build. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards no, just because, at least not as part of the initial like 12 hours. Maybe after the fact, we could do like a little live stream or like a little episode dedicated to adding in bike infrastructure. But I've actually just never added it to any of my cities. I'm not really sold on the mechanic, to be honest with you. I think that they implemented it in kind of a weird way, and it doesn't really make a ton of sense. Like the way that people ride bikes and the way that people choose to ride bikes, it's not the most realistic. Like, you have to have bike parking, and if you don't have bike parking, then people like will ride around until a spot opens up and they can be just going back and forth or like in circles for hours and never find a parking space. Which to me, that seems a bit weird because bikes are one of those things that like, yeah, if the parking is there, if there's like bike racks there, you can use them, but also like you don't need them, right? You see bikes, you know, hooked up to anything, locked up to, you know, fences, light posts, anything like half the time. And granted, you know, a lot of cities might frown on that, but at the end of the day, like bikes don't always have to be outside on a bike rack either. You know, they can be stored inside. They're even nowadays, I see a lot, like when I take the train into work, I see a lot of people have these like little fold up kind of like pocket bikes, so to speak. So it's not the same thing where like I get in city skylines having parking for cars, having enough parking infrastructure, because that's something like in the real world, you know, you have to have a place to put your car. You have to have a dedicated parking space wherever you go to put your car. And so I could see like needing those, like needing parking garages, parking lots, street parking, having all that in your city. That's a real consideration because people can't just, you know, put their car in their pocket, right? Pocket cars don't exist, but pocket bikes do, especially in urban areas. So I don't know. I feel like the focus on parking infrastructure for bikes is a little bit too much in this game, and the mechanic just isn't one that I'm sold on. So I don't really care to implement it right now. I don't want to spend all that time doing that when we can spend that time, you know, improving other aspects of the city, right? You know, expanding on the city in a little bit more meaningful ways. So here, yeah, just focusing on adding in some green space, expanding out some of the surfaces from the existing assets that we've put down. And if we put down, you know, new park assets, this is one way to kind of make these park spaces fill whatever weird plot of land you're trying to fill. Or, you know, if you have a city service building or anything like a school like that we just did with that fire station, you can expand the surfaces in the asset and make it fill that space that you're trying to work with. So it really helps in spaces like this here, for example, where it's like, you know, an awkward curve in a road where, you know, you don't maybe want to put a building down because the lot doesn't conform well to kind of the shape of the area that you're working in. So, you know, it helps to just fill this with some green space, you know, add in some paths, add in some trees, put down, you know, like I did here, like a big dog park. Now it makes it a functional area. People will come to it, and it's more than just, you know, some empty random space in your city. It looks like it was thought about. It looks like it was actually developed, you know, for a purpose. And so that's kind of the goal of this episode is like, I want to, you know, if you're not used to doing stuff like this, hopefully this can kind of help you out, maybe give you a bit of inspiration in terms of like what to do with those empty random spaces in your city. You know, I feel like a lot of times, at least I've always struggled with this in the past, is like, I've developed, you know, my nice city blocks, and I kind of put down my city services, and then there are a lot of just random gaps, and I go, man, what am I going to do with that? You know, I can't really put down a building there. It doesn't really fit. I don't really want to put a city service area. I don't really need it. You know, what can I do to make this space just not feel so like empty? And so just adding in like these purposeful green spaces, you know, whether it's a small park, whether it's a big park, whether it's, you know, a playground with a couple of paths around there and just adding some trees, it just turns that area from something completely empty and useless and it's something like practical for your city. And it just, at the end of the day, it just makes your fitty, your fitty, excuse me, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but yeah, it makes your city feel more complete. And so that's what we're trying to do here, is just make these neighborhoods kind of feel a little bit more alive. You know, put some purposeful development into these areas, and just, you know, filling in some landscaping and everything. It just helps those spaces, you know, feel complete, like we've worked on them, and then we can kind of just check the box and say, you know, that's good enough, and then just move on to the next one. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to be bouncing around in plenty of parts of the city, just filling in spaces, filling in some buildings, you know, kind of thinking about some of these smaller details before we hit some bigger projects in the future. But right there, really cool. I'm really happy that they added in those new wide pathways, because now we have, dare I say, like a half functional alleyway. So before, I used to use the concrete, one of the concrete surfaces, to just make alleyways behind zone buildings, because if you use a road, then you run the risk of buildings actually being zoned like facing that alleyway. So you don't want to do that. At least I don't want to do that without any kind of zoning toggle built into the base game right now. I know there are mods that can help with that, but right now, again, we're only doing a vanilla series, and so we can't use any of those fancy tools. But adding in those wide pathways behind buildings makes it so where the buildings won't zone on that alleyway and people actually walk down them. People can't drive on them, but it captures the aesthetic, and it does serve some sort of a functional purpose for at least people can use that to get around, albeit walking instead of their cars. But hey, it's better than nothing, right? So we'll take what we can get. But yeah, here I wanted to fill this riverside with a very nice park space. I think this is kind of a cool destination in this part of the town. There's this little medium density kind of town center here with some row houses with some shops, and you figure you can come to the riverside and have this just be by this nice park, walk along these trails. You got a tennis court, a playground, a actual like little park space, little amphitheater with a little stage. I love those because I would imagine that maybe if there's a town festival, they'll have some bands there, especially in the summer. People will come out and enjoy the nice weather. And in this part of in this map, it actually seems like the weather is pretty nice all the time. So this is a bit of a more not quite tropical, but coastal climate, a little bit nicer year round. So I can definitely imagine myself wanting to get some gigs there and play outside in the nice park facing the river. So can't complain there. But yeah. So, and then just filling in some trees, kind of again just filling these empty spaces. And I know that on the other side of this, there's like the tram depot and the bus depot, which is not maybe the best thing to look at from this park here. But I do need to go back. This reminded me that I need to go back and actually create like a landscape barrier behind that bus depot, behind that tram depot, so that it'll kind of shield that from the view of this park, and you can look at the river and some nice trees instead of looking at like a big concrete structure with some buses parked outside of it. So, not the best use of the space, I know, but the reason that I really did that is because one thing that you want to consider when you're building your public transit is like the time that it will take to get that transit to their respective routes. So, you got to factor in the time that it's going to take a bus to get to its bus route. And the longer that it has to travel to that route, the greater the risk of any kind of delay. Like I said, there's, heavy traffic, and that bus driver still has to go all the way from the bus garage to its bus route. And now, you have a bus garage that's 5 miles away as opposed to like maybe a mile away. That distance is going to really factor into the timeliness of starting that route. So the closer to the city center I think I can make that, the better. And plus, like, I thought that was just a nice plot of land to kind of transition between the downtown and then whatever's on the other side of the river, like those single family homes and such. And you would imagine that typically, like, along the river there was probably some old industrial uses there at one point. So I'm not too mad about having those bigger garages there for the time being. But yeah, just kind of filling in some of these spots again with some green spaces, and here we're filling in with some zoning. Nice zonable plot of land there just right on the corner. Don't even know why I didn't zone that before. You notice that I've left kind of a couple of spaces empty for the time being in the city, and so it's kind of nice to come back now, but maybe even in the future I might even go back and once we rethink some of our city services, it'll be helpful to go back to those spaces. But this one was one that I wanted to fix. I hated how this elementary school turned out. I just thought it looked really weird. That the vision that I had just wasn't really executed correctly. So I decided to go back and change this a bit. And I wanted to add in a parking lot here because, since it is an elementary school, we're not going to be worried about student parking, but we are going to be worried about things like assemblies or, if there's like a basketball game in the gym that parents are going to come to visit the school. We want to make sure that we have some parking here for any kind of visitors. So that's what we put in that kind of medium-sized lot. I didn't want to go, completely overkill. Plus, this is a bit of a dense area, so parking is not going to be, maybe as available. I'm thinking of like some neighborhoods, in Chicago where a dedicated parking space for a school is actually probably considered a premium. So, we want to factor in that as well. And then just filling in the rest of the space with some pathways, with some green space. And we had the basketball court there, so this will now be like a functional park space that will positively contribute to our city's leisure score again. So yeah, just this whole part of the city has actually kind of turned out kind of cool, with the big town, the big city hall there, a lot of cool green space there. We got the police headquarters over there, and now we have on the other side we have this elementary school. But some real nice green space here when you're coming in off of the highway to this massive traffic jam. At the very least, you could breathe in some fresh air potentially, from these trees here and all that, since you're going to be sitting in traffic for quite a bit. And this is one spot that I'm going to need to come back to. I'm hoping that once we add in some public transit, some of these traffic jams are going to get alleviated, because this is the only way to get around the city is to walk or to drive. So we laid out a lot of the tram tracks in the last episode, but we have yet to set the routes. We have yet to set any bus routes, and we don't even have. I realize there's no rail connection. There's no outside rail connection in this map. So I'm either going to have to make one, or the train might just become a regional train that as we come back and potentially do some more builds in this region. Let me know again in the comments if there's any kind of challenge that you think would be interesting to try to do in this region outside of the city, like building another city. Maybe if we focus on like a certain resource, or if we have another kind of time limit or population challenge or something like that. Let me know, because I would love to expand this region with a couple of different cities, and then have that rail service, go to all those cities, and that can be kind of the main transportation source for stuff like that. But yeah, just right there, put down some low rent housing. That is one thing that I have not thought about at all in this city, and that's something that I need to consider. And the reason that I consider that is because when I plopped down that skate park, I realized that like a bunch of homeless tents popped up, and that to me makes me feel like it makes me think that we do not have enough affordable housing in our city. So we need to focus on that, and that's something that I'll probably be coming back to, throughout the next few episodes when we have some time here and there. I want to go through some of these, especially like kind of close to the downtown. Adding in some low rent housing will be very, very important, to make sure that all of our citizens at all wealth levels can live in our city and have access to all the city services and everything. So something that I always kind of forget about in this game, but because again, it wasn't really a mechanic, and there was really no like wealth mechanic in City Skylines 1, at least not like that. So very cool addition to the game. Was it again executed the best? I mean, maybe. I still think that SimCity 4 did it better, to be honest with you. The wealth mechanic in that game, and just the city design in that game, is just really, really cool and well thought out. This one, I think the homelessness kind of is the prime example of maybe why I don't think the mechanic works the best. It's like, yeah, they gave us low rent housing, but they didn't give us a like anything for homeless people. So it would be nice to if you're going to build that mechanic in, at least give us like some homeless shelters or something to be able to address that population group in our city, rather than just, I mean, unless the low rent housing kind of functions as that, but I think that is not necessarily the case. I think that there actually is like an additional population in your city of just like people that cannot afford any kind of housing, and so that is a population that we would like to address. But right now with the current game mechanics, we can't do that. So hopefully that's something that gets addressed in the future, along with maybe an improvement to the bike mechanic, I would hope. But yeah, let's hope that City Skylines 2 has a bright future, with these new developers and stuff, which is something that I haven't really talked about too much. But I'm trying to be optimistic, and we should be hearing pretty soon. Actually, I think we should be getting like some kind of update in Q1 pretty soon here. So hopefully we'll see some more improvements to the game and things like that. So looking forward to it. But anyway, decided to put down a clinic here. We don't need the capacity, but I do want to think about, this is kind of its own little district. I do want to think about each district having its own dedicated city services, its own fire department, police department, clinic, schools. You want to make sure that each of those districts has all of the city services that it needs, so that people don't have to travel too far to get to those city services. And even if capacity from our big hospital will cover the city in terms of patient capacity, we want to be considerate of ambulance response time as well. Same thing with the fire department, police department. You want to be conscious of response time. So making sure that even though we may, again, have the capacity with one building, for example, to service the entire city, because it's a bit of a smaller city, it might be quite a ways for those vehicles to get where they need to go, especially given our traffic situation. So the more buildings we have, the better those citizens can be served, with better response times and everything. As a bit of a firefighter, I come from like a firefighting background and stuff in my family, so something that I know is that a lot of fire departments want to They strive for 4 minutes or less in terms of response time. So something that I want to consider, when I'm building my cities is, is there adequate city services? But that's enough of that. You guys get the point. But one city service that I haven't thought about too much is communication. It's one of those that was never in City Skylines 1. And so I just never really thought about it. Never even in like the old SimCity games or anything. We never had to worry about like cell service or internet or mail, for example, right? So one thing that I need to come back and address, and we'll probably make some time for that in one of the actual episodes. It doesn't take long to add those assets in, but having saving or maybe even repurposing some space, kind of in these city centers of these districts for something like a post office, it's probably going to be a good thing to make sure that each of these little districts has their own dedicated communication service. And in terms of like a cell tower, I'll put those around when we get some time. I mean, it doesn't take much to place one of those, and I typically try to place those more or less in the outskirts of the city anyway. But obviously, you're going to need cell service downtown, since you can't like attach them to buildings. We can have some workarounds. We'll be able to find some places to get the cell service in and everything. And at the very least, I know there are some assets that we can maybe put down. Like there's a big like data center or something that I've used before. It kind of looks like it could be like a big office, but it'll serve that dual purpose of providing that cell coverage while also providing some extra jobs and stuff to the area. So we'll see what we decide to do with that. But for now, again, just filling in some of these spaces. This was a nice little area that I added in some mixed use buildings. I wanted to make this more of a town center, and adding in that little plaza and some mixed use buildings really help with that. And so I actually noticed I inadvertently zoned some of the when I zoned some row houses in this episode, some of them actually turned out to be the southwest instead of the northeast, which is kind of not my intention. But honestly, I should probably be using the southwest ones a little bit more in this build, given that it's definitely more of a southwest kind of feel to the map rather than like a cold, more temperate northeastern map. But I just like the way that the northeastern ones look. I think that they have a nice variety of colors and styles with the bricks and everything. And the southwest ones kind of impact the parking on some of the road types, like with these angled parking ones that you're looking at, like here. If you were to put the southwest row homes on there, it would actually remove the parking from those roads, whereas the northeast ones don't do that. I don't know why the southwestern ones do that. I think it's because some of them have garages facing the street. So, you imagine that you wouldn't park a car in front of your garage door. So very realistic, right? Very practical, but I just have to be mindful of where I use those. But yeah, I do like them, and I got to use more of them. But yeah, with that being said, this about brings us to the hour of the build. So thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. We're going to be working on our port and then our public transit. So hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Peace out.